We've all been there, we've all stepped on the scales and seen that the number has gone up and thought, what's the point of putting all of this work in if I'm not getting the outcome that I want from it, if I'm not actually losing weight? Well, in this episode of Body Beyond the Scales, I'm going to be running you through how exactly to get the right data from the scales and 7 other alternatives or 7 other things to measure when you're trying to lose weight. So let's get into it. Now, when it comes to using the scales, most people think like a Slimming Club Karen, rather than thinking like a scientist. I want you to think like a scientist. None of this weighing yourself once a week on a random time of the day. I would like for you to start weighing yourself daily. If you weigh yourself daily, we can collect more data and we can start to see the trends. A scientist looks at the trends over time. They don't look at the individual measurements. What I also want you to do is make those times that you weigh yourself as repeatable as possible. So that means I want you to weigh yourself first thing on a morning before you've eaten or drank anything, and with it without any clothes on. That means that we've got the same amount of food inside of you, which should be nothing. And it also means that we've just got the circumstances as close to the same as possible every single day. A few top tips when it comes to the scales: make sure that you're weighing yourself on a tiled surface or a wooden surface and not carpet. Carpet gives you dodgy measurements, so don't use that. Use the same scales as much as possible. So for example, the scales that I have at my house versus the scales that are at my mum and dad's house give very different numbers. So I'm a couple of kg different if I'm on my scales versus their scales. And I clearly haven't put a couple of kg on overnight. So what it's really important to do is have the same pair of scales that you measure on regularly. If you change scales, for example, your scales break, just take a few days to let the measurements and start collecting that data, and don't worry about any of the individual numbers and the trends. I've worked with people and they've got new scales, and what we've seen is the number jump right back up again there, but we know that we just needed to collect more data because it's, well, a new pair of scales. And finally, I've said this already, but I really do want to highlight it. I want you to focus on the trend over time, not the numbers overnight. If we're weighing yourself daily, you're going to start to see fluctuations. You're going to see the scale go up. That might be affected by your period. That might be affected by what you've eaten. That might be affected by how much salt that you've had. You're going to see the scale drop down. That could be affected by any number of factors. But as long as that trend is moving down, we're not bothered what it does day to day. And please do remember that fluctuations are normal. We're not going to focus on those individual measurements. It's that trend over time. So let's talk about those other factors and the important things in the context and that big picture of what else to consider when you're losing weight. Now, the scales are good, but if we do have that broader context, it does mean that you can have a better idea of what's actually going on with your body and whether the changes that you're making are leading to the outcomes that you want. Now, one thing that I really like to use, and I guess this is thing 1, is progress photos. Think of yourself like a teenage boy asking for a haircut. You want to do the front, the back, and the sides. The reason that we want this is that it's going to give us a good idea of what's going on in your body and what changes are happening. What we're looking for here is areas that you've visibly reduced in body fat. Key areas to look for here is around your stomach. That's such a useful one because health is really indicated by the amount of visceral fat you have, which is fat around your stomach. And I'm going to be talking to another method to track this in a second. But we can see if there's been a reduction in body fat around the stomach. That's really important for improvements in key health markers. We can also see more muscle development, so we can start to see improvements, especially if you're working out in the gym, which I highly recommend to anybody that is losing weight. We'll start to see muscular improvements. Those things are really exciting. We want to see these things, and having your pictures actually gives us a better idea of what is going on there and actually allows for us to see these changes. A few top tips on this: you want to be in minimal clothing so that we can actually see your body. You want to use the same lighting as close as possible. I appreciate that if this is going to be a long journey, which for most people it is, you will be taking pictures in different lighting. This is something that I have to point out to my clients all the time, especially when we're reviewing their progress photos, because if they say started in the summer, we can have this nice flattering natural light on their body because they've been able to take the pictures with just, the room being lit. And then in winter, we've got these nasty overhead lights coming down, casting shadows on their body and creating these really unflattering shadows. So it can be really quite, really quite important to be aware of the impacts that that can have, and really to focus on the bigger picture as much as possible. And remember that these are only a tool. They're not the only thing that we're looking at in this picture, but progress photos are so useful for showing what's going on and those changes that you're making. And just as a side note here, some people when they lose weight will lose weight from all over, and some people will lose weight from specific areas first. You can't spot reduce fat, so you can't say look at your body and go, okay, I want to lose fat from around my stomach, I want to lose fat from my arms. If you are in a calorie deficit, your body will lose fat over time. You can't say where you're going to lose that fat from. One thing you can do is choose where you are going to grow muscle. Now, I would recommend that you grow muscle very evenly across your body. However, all bodies respond slightly differently to exercise, and you will have muscles that are slightly faster responders. The key thing is the more muscle you'll have, the more defined you'll look, which will therefore give you more shape, even if your body fat doesn't drop. So it's really important to still build that muscle, especially from an aesthetics purpose. Obviously, it's important from like a physical health purpose and like, yeah, overarching health, let's go. But like from an aesthetics purpose as well, we'll actually get more shape from building more muscle. So progress photo is really useful for seeing those changes as well. Now, number 2 is all about measuring your habits and tracking your behaviors. I love to see the data of what you're doing day to day. So what are you doing across the space of a month? Again, this is about focusing on that trend over time, not overnight. I think we get hung up on this idea that we have to be perfect day to day, but we often forget that one perfect day followed by 6 like absolutely naff days doesn't mean that like that perfect day was better. What I would rather have is you have like 7 above average days, but they are never perfect, rather than having one perfect day and then 6 rubbish ones. So it's really important here that we get context and we look at what you're doing consistently and we look at what you're doing over time, not just overnight. And a key number that I like to aim for here is 80%. So on your habits, on your steps, on your water, on your exercise, are we hitting it 80% of the time that we're intending to hit it? If the answer is yes, in my eyes, you are being consistent. If the answer is no, then we've got a few things to work on. So have a look and think about what you're currently doing habits-wise, and think about the data and managing those habits and going, okay, am I hitting these 80% of the time? If you're not sure what habits you should be aiming for to lose weight, then you can take the Healthy Habits quiz. It's a free quiz, takes 90 seconds, the link's in the description box. And if you take it, it will just give you a little bit of an idea of what your habits that you should be aiming for are. It just makes sure that you're doing changes that are sustainable and actually will give you the most bang for your buck. The link's in the show notes, click that to access it. Now, thing number 3 is physical body measurements. These go really, really well as part of the holy trinity of looking at aesthetic progress. We want measurements, we want scales, and we want progress photos. If we can use these 3 things together, it's a really powerful tool for looking at aesthetic changes. They also give you an objective measure to the changes that you're seeing on the photos. Key areas that I would suggest measuring are waist, hips, chest, arms and thighs. Find areas or marker points on your body that you can know that you're doing the same spot every week. For example, on my biceps, I have a mole on one of my arms and I use that as my marker point for that arm. It's really, really useful to do because it just means that you're always measuring from the same point. On your waist, go from the slimmest point. On your hips, you can go from the biggest point. If you do that, it's just very easy to repeat each week, and that's what we want. We want to make sure this is as controlled in the sense of like an experiment as possible. Now, earlier on, I mentioned about visceral fat, and one way that we can test how much visceral fat you've got is the waist to height ratio. You want for your waist measurement to be half that of your height. If you want a really simple and fun test to do, you can do the string test. So cut a piece of string to your height and then wrap it and then fold it in half and wrap it around your waist. If you can fit it around your waist and there's a little bit of wiggle room, perfect. We're well within that half ratio. If you can't fit it around, then we know that we need to reduce a little bit of body fat. Now, the next thing that I like to measure, thing number 4, is your energy. Now, this can mean different things to different people and you can choose which method is most important for you. But I like to think, how are we feeling day to day? How are you sleeping? How are you doing in terms of your overall vibes? What's your energy like after eating? What's your energy like after waking up? What's your energy like around bedtime? What's your energy like at different points in your cycle? It's really important that you get to know your body and you can start to spot trends. You might find that your energy drops just before your period is due, or you might find that actually you're going to bed and you're absolutely cream crackered, or you're getting a second wind. And it's really important to just know your body. So energy auditing and checking in on yourself and measuring your energy is a really useful tool to do that. You can get as granular as you want with this. You could start measuring in terms of like numbers, scale out of 10, 10 being great energy, 1 being terrible energy, seeing where you fit. Does it vary across the week? Like what changes, what trends are you spotting? And is there anything that you can do to change that? I often find that the more data I have, the easier it is for me to make changes. So tracking the right habits and those habits that are important to you is really, well, key, because that means that you're actually able to make changes to what matters most to you. And what we measure, we manage. So if we measure what's important to us, we can manage what's important to us as well. Now, thing number 5 is to track your period. This is really key if you are a person who has periods, because you can start to understand your body a little bit more and why at certain points of the month you feel certain ways. You can start to understand your cravings better. You can start to understand dips in body image a little bit better. And you can just start to understand what the trends are and what to maybe expect across a month. Your period also correlates with your overall health. So if you are finding that you are having irregular periods, really heavy periods, that might be something to speak to your GP about, especially if it's been going on for longer than 6 months. If you have the data already, you can go armed with that data and have that conversation with your healthcare professional much easier than if you don't have that data and you're going, well, my Periods have maybe been off for the last few months, but I'm not quite sure. So going with that data is super useful. So if you track it already, you're already on it. As a side note to that as well, I've also worked with people where we've increased their calories just before their period because they found that they were struggling to stick to their calorie deficit. And by moving calories up to maintenance, it just meant that they had that little bit more wiggle room and they were less likely to press that big red button. So if that's something that you know that you do, remember that's always an option. Okay, moving on to thing number 6 of what to measure, and keeping a falling off track diary. Now here, what I want you to start looking at is what throws you off course, what throws you off track. Where are you finding that these things are coming up? And start to notice, are there any trends? Are there any trends in the emotions that you're feeling, in the situations that you're in? How is this coming up in your daily life? You can't change something that you don't know that you're doing, so we have to bring it into your awareness first. So after that has happened, so say you have a bout of emotional eating, look at where and what caused that and like what was going on in the situation. Then do that the next time, just to give a little bit of a journal on it. It can just be a rough few minutes, just writing these things down. But if you do that, it can give you a good idea of how you can start to spot the patterns or start to see the patterns that are coming up. Now, those are the 6 that I'm going to explain in somewhat detail. I'm going to run you through a few more suggestions now as point number 7. I thought it was cheeky to give you the total number of things and not really give you explanations on them. So 7 is going to be just other things to track and other things to consider. I don't recommend that you do all of these, but these might be things, again, if it's what's important to you, then it might be worth managing, even just for a little bit. So a few things that you can track are libido. You could do this around your period and see where you have fluctuations within the month. Another thing that you could track is your resting heart rate. Are there any variations and what changes happen over time? Again, are there any correlations between certain times of the month? Blood test measures. If you're regularly having a blood test at the doctor's, then that might be something that you want to track or ask to track with your GP. Are there any things that have improved over time when you've been making habitual changes? PBs in the gym. Have you got evidence that you're getting stronger? Look at those changes over time. Mood stability. Do you feel like you're able to handle emotional swings? Are you getting fewer emotional swings these days? What's going on with your overall mood? Brain fog. How clear are your thoughts? How much are you feeling tired on an evening? What's going on with your overall brain? If you are someone who suffers with chronic pain, are you experiencing more pain, less pain? How is that occurring in your life? Are you noticing any trends? Are you noticing a reduction in food noise or mental load around food? Have you noticed any changes in sleep quality, improvements or disimprovements? And what do they look like on that day-to-day basis? And finally, day-to-day enjoyment of your life. With the habitual changes that you're making, are you finding that you're enjoying your life more? Is there anything that you feel like it's taken away from? How are you doing within yourself? Again, you don't have to track everything, just track what matters to you. But they're just some ideas of things that you could include and measure that go way beyond the scales and tell a much deeper and more intricate story and give more context to what's going on within your life and your health. And one thing that you could do is run mini experiments. So do an experiment between 7 to 30 days and see if you implement some changes, what changes does that have on the things that you're measuring? If you implement a new habit change, how does that affect sleep? And see how you can do these changes and think like a scientist. If you think like a scientist with these changes, I promise you, you will find it much easier than if you think like a Slimming Club Karen and just focus on the scales. That's it for this one. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. If you have, please make sure that you give the show a 5-star rating or review and hit that follow or subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next one.